Hi everyone, and welcome to my analysis of my round 3 match in the Way of Onitama tournament, where I played against Malfranco, and spoiler alert, I lost this match. Malfranco played a very strong game. I made a couple of mistakes that I should have avoided, and this led to a very well-deserved win by Malfranco. I wanted to have recorded this video a few days ago, in the weekend probably, but I also participated in the 1 week round robin tournament in Boardgame Arena, and I don't know if this was planned or if it was a bug in the system, but we had to play 14 matches simultaneously. So you can imagine that I spent most of my weekend playing Onitama, and I didn't really have much time or mind space to work on the analysis of this game. Furthermore, because it's a game that I lost, I wanted to be extra careful and extra critical of my moves, to really try to pin it down and understand what I did wrong and what led to my loss. Before we start playing through the moves, the traditional analysis of the cards we see in this game. This game has a fairly neutral card set. We see that there are 2 forward cards. We have the crab and we have the ox. We have 2 symmetrical diagonal cards, the elephant and the monkey. And then we have the 1 different card, which is a right diagonal. So this set of cards means that the right diagonals are slightly more represented than the left diagonals. We have 3 right diagonals against 2 left diagonals. We also have a couple of forward cards, so we are not sure if the development of the forward pawns will be done with both pawns forward or with a crossing of the pawns. Either way might work. What else do we see? We don't see much cohesion in these cards. We have the elephant with lateral structural glue, which is the most important type of structural glue. We have the monkey, diagonal structural glue. Nothing special, nothing extremely solid. The crab also has a form of structural glue, even though it doesn't really promote very solid structures, so I don't really count the crab as a card with structural glue. So we see that we are somewhat lacking in the lateral structural glue in this game. Only the elephant really supports that. And based on that, I can expect a bit more dynamic positions in the mid game. It will be hard to hold down the fort to really have a solid structure. At least not as solid as in some of the previous games I analyzed. So the game will probably be a bit more mobile, a bit more based on trades and on exchanges, and with a bit more dynamic positions where structures change more fluidly instead of being built on solid blocks. So let's see how this game starts. Malfranco plays the first move, and he starts with the elephant a5 to b4. To this, I will reply with Cobra A1 B2, and Malfranco will play Monkey E5 D4. To which I reply with Elephant B1 C2. Now here I want to make a small remark on why I chose to play the elephant instead of, for example, a more traditional E1 D2. So why did I go for B1 C2 instead of the more typical E1 D2? The reason is quite simple. In this type of position, I see that there's a possibility to play either a forward card or a diagonal card from Malfranco's perspective. And by making this move, I guarantee that I have a complete, a solved opening. Because if Malfranco uses his diagonal, which is here I think the most likely, because he still has these two moves, so basically by closing first the edge pawns, he's locked himself into the two diagonal moves. So this is the most likely scenario. And if this is indeed the case, with the cobra and the monkey, I can cross my pawns and finish my development here. On the other hand, if Malfranco decides to play a forward pawn, a forward move, which I don't really see any good option here, but if he would decide to play a forward move, I could still wrap up my development with two forward moves as well. In this game, it's very unlikely that that will occur because there are two very good diagonal moves and no good forward moves with the crab. But anyway, I think this is an interesting point to take a little break and to explain my decision making, always with this idea of trying to have my opening as lean as possible. So try to guarantee that my opening is solved as soon as possible, no matter what the opponent plays. So in this situation, Malfranco will continue with cobra d5 c4. To which I will reply with the monkey e1 d2. And here we have b4 a3 with the elephant. Now this is a good move, becoming aggressive early on in the game. I like this move. He had the more intuitive, more passive completing of his development, which would lead to me completing my development as well. But instead he chose a more aggressive move, immediately claiming some space in the center. I think this is perfect. This is what I always try to advocate for in my games, to have this this type of aggression, this type of attempts at gaining space as much as possible. So I think that Malfranco played perfectly here. This is also the move I would have played in his position. Here I can reply in multiple different ways. I could reply with the more conventional cobra d1 to e2. This would be a very conventional move. I have the elephant holding my whole structure together. But here I was also a bit tempted by Malfranco's early aggression, and I tried to think if I would have any good alternative move to fight back, to immediately reply to his aggression by showing some aggression of my own. And as such, the move that I played was ox b2, b3. Now, this ox move is, again, less intuitive, less conventional than the typical finishing of my development. But I like this move. It puts a target on his a3 pawn. I'm attacking his a3 pawn. He has to reply to my threat. So because of that, yeah, maybe moves like completing his development are less appealing. But this was my way of trying to bring the fight immediately back to Malfranco. And here, Malfranco plays, in my opinion, a beautiful move. He plays crab jumping from a3 to c3. I think here he had one other main option. Instead of this crab move, he could have used his monkey c4 b3, just capturing the pawn. But I do think that this move that he played is more elegant and at the same time also less intuitive. The reason being that he jumped into a position where only two of his pieces are eyeing it and three of mine are attacking it. So this is a move that has to be very well calculated. And in this case, Malfranco did it perfectly, because there's no way to gain this pawn in this position. Because the cobra, with the setup I have, the cobra will never be looking at this structure. So that means that with the elephant, either this pawn is looking or this pawn is looking. So either b3 or d2 are looking, but not both simultaneously. c2 will look with the crab next, but I have to pick either b3 or d2 to look at this position and disregard the other pawn. So indeed here Malfranco calculated very accurately. He immediately gained control of the center with ideas of maybe in the next move completing his development with a very solid, very strong pawn structure. So this was a move that when I saw it, it took me by surprise that he had the guts, but at the same time the calculation strength to pull off a move like this. So here, how do I continue? I take first with the elephant, d2, c3. And he immediately captures back with monkey d4, c3. And this is the moment where I made the mistake, or one of the mistakes that ended up costing me the game. Here I could continue quite simply, for example, by capturing in c3, and then he would just capture back. And this is a fairly symmetrical position. I will then have the possibility to push my pawn into the game, or maybe to fall back with his pawn into the game, but this is a fairly even position for the game. So there's nothing special, nothing particularly good or particularly bad for me if I capture the pawn on c3. But instead, I decided to capture the pawn on c4 with the cobra. Why did I decide that? Well, possibly in this position I thought I was slightly ahead and I was confident in my position. So I thought, okay, let's trade as many pieces as possible. Let's trade this pawn first and this pawn second. But I missed to really calculate this accurately, because what actually happens when I take this trade is that I'm trading a pawn on the third row with a pawn on the first row from my opponent. This is pretty much what's happening with this trade. So what this means is that I'm losing 2 tempi of advantage, right? Because I had to spend 2 moves advancing my pawn to the third row, whereas the b5 pawn from Malfranco hasn't wasted any moves yet. So I'm trading a pawn that has moved twice already with a pawn that has moved 0 times. So I'm losing 2 tempi with this trade. Now, it should have been clear to me from the start that this was not the brightest idea, but somehow it was the idea that I played. So I took b3 in c4 with the cobra, and of course Malfranco immediately replied with the elephant, taking on c4 back. So if we look at this position, now I'm already a little bit disadvantaged, or significantly disadvantaged even, because now he has control of c3. I don't really have a quick way to challenge this control. I don't have a direct way to really start challenging the control of c3, and he will have plenty of time to just bring his master into the game while my pawn is still trying to get into the game as well. So in this position, Malfranco already has an advantage. But here I played the second move that I think ruined my chances for good. The move that I played here was taking crab c2, c3. So whereas before I was in a disadvantage, in a space disadvantage, in a tempo disadvantage, now with this trade, I'm in an even bigger disadvantage, right? It's the basic principle we discussed several times already, which is when you have an advantage, whether it's a material advantage or a tempo advantage or a space advantage, usually you're favored to trade. and you're favored to trade because you're making that advantage more visible, more noticeable. On the other hand, if you're at a disadvantage, if you have a tempo disadvantage or a space disadvantage, then you should try to play a bit more constructively and avoid trading too easily, because that will just magnify the disadvantage that you're in. And here, I don't know why, I went against my own rule, my own principle, and I ended up trading 2 pawns that converted my position from a fairly even, maybe even slightly advantaged position, to a position that is completely losing. A position that gives Malfranco the control of c3, his master immediately ready to step in and support his position, and me having to fight against a c3 pawn with no tools close to it. So I will have to waste a lot of moves, which will allow, and now where does my master go, which will allow Malfranco plenty of time to regroup and plenty of time to convert this and to push this further. But still, even though this is a game-winning advantage for Malfranco, he will still have to play it perfectly, and you will see that indeed that's what he did. So how does the game continue? I continue with a monkey d1 to c2, so trying to put up a small shield and get a bit back into this position. And here Malfranco simply plays cobra c5 b4. So now Malfranco is defending this pawn. A trade here is of course game breaking, because if I trade, his master is on c3, my master is on c1, how will I ever go around his master? There's no chance. But indeed what you will see here is that trading is the only real option I have, because what else can I do? I cannot avoid trading these 2 pawns because I have no way to move my pawn back. I could force the trade in a different position, maybe, for example with the elephant, moving my pawn to d2 to force the trade in this square, but then still he would have the initiative because he would have the master move first. I could hold on to the trade in that spot, for example by moving my master, and then takes, and now still he has the initiative. So the fact is that there is no real way in this position to avoid the trade anymore without any major downside. So because of that, I ended up simply just trading on c3, taking with the ox, Malfranco taking back with the monkey, and this is the position then for this endgame. So how does this endgame continue? Here I have 2 main options to try to prey on the fact that Malfranco only has forward moves. One of them is a little bit more aggressive, so just using the cobra to walk towards his master. But if I do this, he simply uses the ox to jump sideways, and now I will not be able to contain his master anymore. The other option I could choose, and it's the option that I ended up choosing, was to use the cobra to go from c1 to b1. I want to try to hold on to the elephant as much as possible, because that will give me more chances to hold to a certain position, to wall his master, to defend his master. But here in this endgame, you will see that Malfranco plays perfectly. And as such, I would like to spend some time analyzing this execution, analyzing Malfranco's execution carefully. As we briefly touched on the previous game, end games are all about the more advanced player trying to reach the shrine, and the more retracted player trying to shield the opponent, right? But what we also see is that even if you're the aggressive player, the one who is trying to reach the shrine, if you don't have a clear aggressive move, and in this case your only aggressive move would be c2, which is not an option because it's guarded by both the elephant and the monkey. It's still important, even if you don't have an aggressive move, that you choose the correct defensive move. And in this case, you have a few options for your defensive move. You can either use your crab or you can use your ox. These are your possible moves. So what is then the move that you want to choose? Well, it's usually the move that keeps you the most into the game, the move that limits your opponent's moves the most. And here, I believe that move is the ox from c3 to b3. This is precisely the move played by Malfranco. This is the correct move. If you would have played to e3 or to a3, I would have had a chance to run. But by locking me here in this opposition type of position, I have these two forward moves, and one of them is removed by the cobra. So this is my only forward move, but the big advantage is that now he's one position away from this move, from my most desirable move. If he would be in either a3 or e3, he would be too far, and I would then be able to wall him with my elephant. So now he would be the one moving back and I would be the one moving forward. This would be winning for me. But here, Malfranco calculated perfectly, and he left me with my only option, which would be the c2 square. So this is exactly what I played, b1, c2. But still, the player controlling this endgame is Malfranco. Let's see next what his move is. So now, again, he has to analyze what are my possibilities to move forward and what are his possibilities to move forward. When you're disadvantaged, normally you look at your possibilities to move forward because you are closer to the opposing shrine than the other player. So this is what Malfranco does here. He sees that he is 2 steps away from my shrine after his next move. I am still at least 3 steps away from his, so it's his chance to be aggressive. And he does so with the cobra. b3 to a2. Now, I'm the defensive player, and I have to see what are his threats in this current position. And that's the problem, he has too many. He has the monkey eyeing b1 and b3. He has the crab eyeing a1 and c2. So now the question is, how do I actually hold on to all of these threats? And as a matter of fact, I don't. And that's why this endgame is lost for me. So what do I play here? I go elephant c2, b2, trying to smother him a bit. And by doing so, I remove these 3 options with the ox. But again, even though I managed to remove 3 of his more aggressive options, he still has the 4th one, and that's the one he goes for. He plays crab a2 to a1. And now here, it's again my turn to play, my turn to look at what his threats are, and he has quite a few. He has b1 and b2. How do I hold on to both of these? Well, again, I do not. And because I cannot hold on to both of these, this is game winning for Malfranco. So what do I play here? Here I go ox b2 to c2, removing this position, but again still having a hole. And what does he play? Well, he plays exactly into that hole, a1 b1 with the elephant. And now again, what are his threats? Well, actually here, he has two paths for a mate in two. He can go back with the ox and then finish with the monkey, or go back with the monkey and then finish with the ox. So again, the question here is, how do I hold on to both of these? And again, I have no answer to that question. So here I simply play Cobra C2 to D3, eyeing neither of the mating positions, and he just has to choose one. He goes with monkey B1 to C2, I play crab D3, D4, and Malfranco finishes the game with ox C2 to C1. So this was a game that was played flawlessly by Malfranco. I cannot really think of any inaccuracies, any mistakes played by him. If you look at my playing on a first instance, you also don't really see mistakes. You don't see me giving away material, you don't see me playing in very non-sound ways. But there is one fundamental mistake in my approach to this game, and that was having completely misevaluated how my trades reshaped the space of the game. I put myself into a position where I did two trades that took me from an even position to a losing position. Yeah, I think I should have done better than this. But yet this is what I played. And as such, I think this game was a very interesting game to analyze, because it's a clear case study on the importance of space in a game of Onitama. It's very easy to count material. You just have to see if you have more pawns than your opponent. Evaluating space is a bit more nuanced, but it is still something you can and you should be able to do when you're analyzing your own games, when you're playing your own games. And failing to do so, which is what I did in this game, easily translates into a losing position. There is another important lesson in this game, I believe, and this is a lesson for me, but it's also a lesson for all of you, which is if you are in a losing position, really avoid trading material, especially when you are confident in your own game. If I have more pawns on the board and I feel confident in my game, having more pawns on the board gives me more chances to come back into the game. We saw that in the game from Primo Clark against Mousefish, where Mousefish was ahead, but because there were so many pawns on the board, Primo Clark had the chance to gradually come back into the game. Now, I think when you're confident in your game and when you're confident in your ability to read the game and to play the game, it's very important that you avoid trades if they're neutral or if they're not favorable to you, because that will give you more chances to fight back into a winning position, and it will also give your opponent more chances to make a mistake. So these are the two main lessons I took from this game. Evaluate your space as carefully as you evaluate your material. Space and tempo are as important to a winning game of Onitama as material is, and sometimes even more, especially in the end game. So don't go for trades when they lead to losing space. And the second most important lesson is if you feel confident about your game, if you feel that you can read the game well, that you can calculate the game well, don't trade by default, because that is shrinking the complexity of the game. It's giving you less opportunities to outplay your opponent, and it's giving your opponent less opportunities to make mistakes. So if you feel confident, if you feel that you can play a good game of Onitama, really only trade when you see a clear advantage coming from that trade, and never trade pieces by default, and especially not if you're losing. So this is my analysis for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you managed to learn something out of this game. I'm sure that I did. At least for me, it was a great reminder of some of the most fundamental concepts of Onitama. And I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you.